Welcome to the January 2022 channel map. Can you believe that I was on time this time? I can believe it because I prepared for this. So let's talk about December first. Let's talk about 2021. First of all, if you guys remember to the last year, if you're following me for that long, then you might remember that there was this hour-plus long dad call that I did where I actually recapped everything that happened in the year. I'm not sure I'll do that again. If you want to see that again, you can comment. But either way, there's some stuff that happened, specifically in December, that we'll talk about now. So in this recap, we obviously are going to talk about the development of Onatar and Antikythera, but I would first like to reiterate from the previous channel map that obviously did indeed come a couple of days late, that indeed the No Frauds Club YouTube channel has launched. We've got two conversations with some very famous, what's this opposite of failed? Very successful. I was trying to channel a Trump joke, but it failed. I'm the very failed Trump joke teller. And I interviewed a couple of people. I had a conversation with Jonathan Blow and with Casey Muratori. You probably know their names. If you don't, I still recommend you check them out because there's some pretty cool conversations. I also was able to release 2 birthday maps, 2 episodes of One for the Future, which I did reference in the previous channel map. So cool that I was able to make good on my word there and celebrate the birthdays of 2 community members. So that was for Balethal and for Hoop Thrower. And if you're not familiar with One for the Future, I will probably remember to leave a link down below that you can check it out. It's just some fun maps that are loosely connected to each other, sort of like a birthday campaign. You know what I'm saying? And yeah, we obviously did some LPs. We concluded the Command & Conquer 3 playthrough, which is unfortunate that it took us that long, but whatever. We did a one-off of Hedon, which is a retro-style FPS puzzle exploration game, ? So you can check that out if you're interested. There was the Portal 2 playthrough, which we finished in 2 streams, which I suppose is great because Valve can't count to 3, and apparently neither can I. Then, obviously, we've been doing the Divinity Original Sin playthrough with my brother. That's been more casual and laid back. The timestamps are kind of humorous, I guess. You can check it out if you're like really looking to skim through and find some memery. But it's admittedly probably not worth people watching, to be honest. The game isn't really worth playing, but it's a fun way for him and I to immortalize some fun, in air quotes, some prospective alleged fun that we're having in the realm of the internet. So that's something I can fondly look back at later, I'm sure. Going into the meat and potatoes of the recap, though, we should talk a little bit more in depth about the stuff that we did with Antikythera. And by we, I of course mean Vic and myself. So Vic 7 is the engine architect, the programming master from Poland. He's been working side by side alongside me. That's 3 sides, and he has been smashing together quite a few changes on the engine, and we've been making some progress. So expect a video probably within the first week of January 2022, smashing out and documenting some of the features that we've recently added. One of them is a pathfinding test, which is really exciting. So the pathfinding has been improving time and time again. At this point, we're looking pretty good. You know, we're feeling pretty good about the pathfinding. Obviously, there's some shortcomings and some more work needs to be done. But the unit-to-unit avoidance, especially on diagonals, is looking pretty good. Avoiding more static objects is something that we're having trouble with and something that we'll, look for more effort onto. But for just a few days worth of work, honestly, the pathfinding is looking quite promising. And at this point, we've just got so many different things that we've been trying to implement, and occasional bug fixes that we have to chase down, and all of that effort on art processing for pulling together ports from other games and whatnot, and then also data entry has been my forte the last month. I've been doing a lot of data entry, getting the items that we planned in those Onatar dev streams entered into the game base, the code base, also doing all of that data entry for some unit fields, and making sure that we can eventually, laying the groundwork for generating the website entries via the game itself. So having all of that information ready to go. All of that is pretty important. All that is pretty cool. However, the main concern that we were trying to bang out here is not just the pathfinding, but it's also aesthetics, right? It's unit responses, portraits, all of that stuff. So we've got some of that stuff hooked up. The portraits are, rough cut of them is implemented. We probably need to adjust the rules a little bit for the spacing and the chances of having variance, because a lot of the variations are very noteworthy. So you actually notice them when they're happening. And so if they're happening a little bit too often, then that actually makes it look very unnatural. And something that's contributing to this is probably the fact that it's running at a higher frame rate than in Brood War, because our engine runs at a higher frame rate in general. So the whole game runs at, I would say, a higher frame rate. If you just look at any of the demos that we've shown so far, it probably looks like it's running at like 1.2x speed or something like that, as far as the animations themselves go, whereas obviously the actual time values are the same. So that's one example of where just porting it to a new environment has changed a little bit of how we think about it. So that's something to keep in mind. The other thing, of course, I did mention unit responses. So we're going to be doing some pretty interesting things with unit responses. As a bit of a teaser for that, I'll say we have repurposed and removed pissed lines, annoyed lines, where you have to spam click on stuff. This might come as a bit of I would say some people might be upset about this, but to be honest, when are you ever really experiencing a game when you're just spam clicking to find an Easter egg? I'd prefer the Easter egg happens as a result of some very specific circumstances, or maybe just pure random chance, depending on what's going on with that. And there can be different, arguments for like different cases. But one of the main reasons why I would want to have something like that, if I was going to include an Easter egg, if I was going to script an Easter egg and then voice act an Easter egg and then implement the rules programmatically to make the Easter egg function under certain circumstances and then test it to make sure it works and all that, if I was going to go through all that trouble, then, the Easter egg would actually have to justify itself. I don't really think that you get good reinforcement of a unit's character by spam clicking on it when you're supposed to be playing the game. And so if you even have the opportunity to spam click a unit when you're playing an RTS, then I've fucked up somewhere else, downstream. I've left you with the opportunity to do that when you're supposed to be focusing on gameplay, because otherwise the enemies will kill you. So maybe you've just almost won the game and you haven't yet finished, and that's why you're spam clicking. Maybe you're doing it for style points. I don't know. But it won't be resulting in pissed lines, and that was a decision that I reached pretty early on in the conceptualizing or reconceptualizing, re-examining unit responses. Because I think there's a lot of things that people just don't do, right? So one of the other things we're planning for unit responses is actually having it so that there are context-specific variations of unit responses. So one obvious one would be you issue an order, but this order is targeting a unit, an enemy unit. So therefore, you'll have an aggressive line as opposed to a passive line. That already exists in like Warcraft 3 and StarCraft 2 and probably many other RTS games. One example as well that I got from Command & Conquer 3, funnily enough, was when you select a unit that's in combat, they will have a different line than if you selected a unit that is just sitting there doing nothing. And this is something that should probably have also been in StarCraft 2, because a classic example I always bring up is when you select a Thor and he's in the middle of getting owned by something, or he's attacking something, or he's in the middle of combat, and he says, "Get me back into the fight!" And you're like, you're literally in the fight though, so my immersion is already broken. Why did you do this? That kind of stuff obviously is stuff we want to avoid. And I think context-specific lines can actually be really interesting. An additional vector for people who are paying attention to get some actual gameplay information from their units. So one of the examples would be if enemies are nearby or combat is happening nearby and a unit actually is finished training, they may have a different ready line that is them being a bit more alert or a bit more aggressive or a bit more concerned than their normal ready line. So there would be like a ready passive and a ready alert. And those would be the two different kinds of ready lines that you might experience. And so that would be one easy example where if you hear that, you probably want to hit that spacebar button or like cycle to the most recent notification or whatever that button ends up being in Cosmonarchy Retail. Because if you hear that, you're going to be like, oh shit, that base is going to be under attack soon. Or like, oh, there's enemies near that base. And maybe you didn't notice that before. So, that might be a very niche instance. You should be watching the minimap anyway, and you probably will be aware of it from other alerts. But it's interesting to me to think about stuff like that, right? Is how can we take unit responses and actually do something more interesting with them and add more context to enhance the immersion? Because it doesn't necessarily degrade the immersion as long as you don't have lines like the Thor line where he's saying something that should not be being said in the moment that it's being said. Because maybe it's just like a line where you select a Maverick and he's in the middle of fighting and he just says, "Commander," or something like that, right? If that happens, it doesn't really degrade the immersion. Maybe it does on a small level because you're like, is this really how casual you feel like when you're in the middle of a fight to the death with like aliens or something? Whereas if you did select the Maverick and he was like, "Commander, send help, or whatever the fuck, then maybe that makes a bit more sense. Maybe he says some line where he's actually trying to avoid death and, kind of reinforces the idea that there's a battle going on. I think that ends up being more interesting. And then additionally, you could select the unit, and if enemies were sighted but not engaged, that could be an additional line, right? So there's selected passive, selected ready, and selected aggressive, we could say. Or something like that, selected active maybe. So these are all different things that we've been considering. I definitely think pushing it in a more interesting and context-specific direction will help generally elevate the feel of being an army commander and selecting units and giving orders to these infantry units or whatever the case may be, right? So reinforcing the fantasy, the power fantasy or whatever of being able to play as an army commander, I think is quite important, and it's a worthy goal. And in this case, not every single unit is going to have, say 4, 5, 6 lines that meet every single category. Maybe some units don't even have the ready alert line, for example. But there's going to be a basic assumption that every unit is going to have, context-specific responses in some fashion or another, and that's just the way that it's going to be. So I'm looking forward to exploring that later on in the next year. In this year, I guess, because I probably won't release this until the next year. That would make sense, right? So anyway, we've done a recap. We've talked about the aesthetics that we've been adding, the unit responses, and the portraits that we added to Antikythera. Shout out to Veek for doing a ton of work in the penultimate day of the year, the 30th of December. We were together working on stuff for probably I would say 10 hours or something crazy. We just smashed a ton of stuff. I did a bunch of data entry and ported a bunch of assets and whatnot, but he hooked up a bunch of things for unit requirements, so that's taken care of. And then, as I mentioned before, pathfinding, it's still in flux. It's still being developed. Actually, the same for networking, but at least the pathfinding system for unit avoidance seems pretty good. And we also fixed some issues with pathing around buildings, so that's much better now. Once we actually adhere buildings to a grid, it'll be even more consistent, and particularly when buildings are put together, that'll be even more consistent for pathing. And also some issues with the map edge were resolved, so progress is being made, progress is being had. I post about it in the Discord server, and if you are a lucky individual, really, it's not really about luck, is it? It's more about merit. If you're a merited individual on the Discord server, then you have access to the channel, The Yes Frauds Club, which is where I post the more internal updates. But of course, there will be some more public ones that are coming to the No Frauds Club YouTube channel. So if you're not subscribed to that, I would get subscribed to that. Fix that issue. Head over there and hit that button and smooch me and everybody else who's been on the channel. So let's talk about plans for January of 2022. Obviously, the biggest plan is to do that Cullen's birthday 2022 thing, which is the stress test of Antikythera. So it's like killing 2 birds with 1 stone. It's a birthday present for my brother, and it's also a lovely stress test and maybe preview of the features that are in Antikythera. Maybe it'll be a preview of Onatar. Maybe it'll be some other game mode that we are able to build, because Onatar is pretty complex. I mean, not as much as an RTS, but in order to go from no gameplay systems to all of that, it is a lot of work for a single month. So we'll see where we go. But that will probably be released at least to the internal testers, those trusted, merited individuals, as I mentioned before. It won't just be for my brother and I and, Veek, who's on the dev team. It'll be for a little bit more expanded circle than that. So if you're one of those people, or you want to become one of those people, maybe that's some motivation for you. And if you are already one of those people, then maybe that's something to look forward to. Aside from that, I would say the biggest other thing that I'm going to be doing as far as production goes is the final mission of Cosmonarchy Brood War. The final birthday map is going to be, it's planned for early 2022, not exactly January. So you can stay tuned for that one. That will most likely be final. I say final with an asterisk, because if it turns out that Antikythera isn't ready by the time I need to enter into production for the next birthday maps, then I will obviously have to go back to Brood War, and it'll be very sad. But at the same time, there's only 4 more to go overall, including the one that I'm planning for early 2022. So we have to keep that in mind. The birthday season is almost over. And so at least I'm pretty sure there's only 4 more to go. That number might get slightly increased if I finally get some people's birthdays. And they also happen to be nearby. But, easy come, easy go. I know too many people who have birthdays. Can you guys stop having birthdays? That might be interpreted as, can you guys die? That's not what I meant, but Mwah. So, going into the first channel plans, we should talk a little bit about the dev streams that have been happening. A lot of them have been data entry more recently, which is very dry, and it's not something I really like to stream, but I figured I'd throw the stream live and we have some design discussions. We look at some trailers for RTS games and stuff. So there's a little bit more to it than just doing work. Sometimes it's like, fun conversations and stuff. But I haven't really been doing too many of those just because, like, who wants to watch somebody do data entry for like 2 hours? I don't even want to do the data entry for 2 hours, so I don't really think that anybody would want to watch it. But some people do, and some people hang out, so there's that. That'll come back a little bit more now that we're out of the data entry woods, at least for the most part. And the work that I'll be doing is a little bit more about engine development, co-development with Veek. So we'll see where those go. I might also be doing a couple streams coming up this month. Maybe not the month of January, but at least this year, where I focus a little bit on updating the One for the Future birthday maps so that they can be they're basically doing a pass to equalize all of the quality and stuff. So I don't know if that'll involve like redoing voice acting. That probably depends on whoever is involved external, because I think all the voice acting I did is probably fine for it. It's not really, doesn't need to be massively high quality because it's just a birthday map. But maybe there, for the stuff that I use text to speech for, maybe the people who that was text to speech of might want to do the voice acting for their own characters. I'm thinking specifically of Balefall, actually, because I know he's done voice acting before, so he might be interested in that. We'll see. But besides that, it's mostly AI-related stuff. It's like giving them layouts and cleaning up their town center placements and expansions and making their expansion sequences more consistent and more intelligible, as well as, in particular, trying to improve the competence of the AI allies. Dynamo is very, very powerful in the latest one for Hoopthrower. Dynamo as an AI ally is incredibly powerful. So I don't know that they should all be that powerful. In fact, maybe he's too powerful. But I think it's more likely that the other AI on that map are just a little bit dumb. And so that's probably the main concern, I would say. So, aside from the dev streams, you'll see more of that casual Divinity playthrough that I'm doing with my brother. If you want to see that, I don't imagine too many people do. So that will still be continuing, but it's mostly just a meme. It's like us goofing off, You can come in and have shoot the shit, have a conversation with us. But for the most part, it's just us hanging out, right? So it's not very focused, we'll say. And the game is not very good. So really, the only reason why you would be watching is it because you're very much a fan of how we operate, which most people probably haven't even given that a shot just because the game is so terrible, which I understand. And I'm just letting you know that that's still going to continue until we're done with the game and its sequel, unfortunately. However, I will probably be doing some crazy campaign playthroughs, some custom campaign playthroughs when I feel like it. When the mood strikes me, I'll probably do some playthroughs. I don't know if those will be recorded or streamed. I figure streaming is more easily accessible for a lot of people, so maybe that'll be it. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. And that might not even happen in the month of January, but maybe we'll, if I'm feeling like a little frisky, because the LPs are going to be on hold until after January, if I'm feeling a bit frisky, I might do that, right? So. For the other channel plans, there will be some more content on the No Frauds Club channel. I will be doing some interviews now that the holidays are over. I'm going to reach out to some more people and hopefully schedule some interviews, conversations, interviews, whatever. And then for the, aside from the long form conversations, you're going to see more short form video essay type content that goes into detail about our standards and about the things that we're going to be planning on doing. And then obviously the Antikythera updates themselves. So you see that kind of content on the channel, on the actual channel for that. I don't have any plans for the semi-pro channel until more interesting stuff happens in that game. Right now it's like player break and all that other stuff. Until I actually am in a situation where it's time to host shows again and talk about stuff, I'm just not going to bother. So we'll see when that happens. For the future, the distant future, I will be picking the LPs back up, as I mentioned, probably in February. We'll see. That'll start off with Braid and then The Witness, and finally the Talos Principle. Those are the 3 games that I have planned in that sequential order, and then we probably go back to like RTSs or something. Aside from that, I am still working on the campaign takedown video. It admittedly is not a major focus right now because I'm so busy working on the engine. That is consuming most of my time. So don't know when to expect that, but it is still going to be working. And unfortunately, I do have to now change when I said, I have a quote in the very early stages of the video where I talk about producing this video in 2021 of all years is goofy. Well, now I have to redo that one, so I say 2022. How unfortunate. And then, of course, there's the Mapping Guide Part 3. I'm not sure if this series even needs a third part. It would benefit from it, But do I care about Brood War anymore? That's the question, because we're going to have our own engine. By the time I get around to resuming that, our own engine might actually exist and have a map editor. So it'll be a tough sell to get me back to working in SEM Draft, I think. But we'll see what happens. We will see what happens. So if you want to see what happens, just stick around. Contribute in the Discord server, start conversations, or just piggyback off of other people, whatever. That's where we're at for the most part. So if you're ever wondering about what's going on with updates, that's the place to be. If you're ever wondering about what's going on in the main channel, or rather the game development studios channel, you can check out the No Frauds Club channel. And I guess that's pretty much everything. We do have a forum, but we don't currently use it too much. So if you want to start conversations there, you're more than welcome. You just have to actually sign up. I'll try to remember to link that in the description too. And that's it. Bye.